I gasped in horror as I stepped into my son's home. The sight that greeted me was deeply unsettling. My 5-year-old grandson, Ethan, who had been missing for days, was found chained and visibly malnourished. Scattered across the room were empty bread bags and discarded plastic bottles. He looked frail and weak, yet when I offered him water, he insisted. "Give it to my sister first." Confused, I asked, "Your sister? Who is she?" From the corner of the room, the weak cry of an infant answered my question, revealing a shocking and painful truth. Determined to seek justice for my grandchildren's suffering, I vowed to punish those responsible for such unimaginable neglect. "Are you asking for money again?" I questioned my son Noah over the phone, frustration evident in my voice. It had been 3 years since my husband passed away at 62, and I had lived alone since. Thankfully, my husband's substantial inheritance had kept me financially secure, but my concern had shifted to Noah. Despite being an adult, he had proven to be irresponsible. He constantly brought work home, overslept, and exhibited a poor work ethic. His career had been marked by numerous job changes and constant financial requests. But the bond of family prevented me from turning my back on him. Unexpectedly, one day Noah brought home a woman and announced, "Mom, I'm going to marry this girl." I greeted her with a polite smile. "Hi, I'm Julia. Nice to meet you," she said. "Nice to meet you too, Julia. But getting married so suddenly?" "I'm surprised," I replied, still processing the news. Noah, casually chewing gum, chuckled. "Well, what can you do when you get pregnant?" Julia gently touched her belly and revealed, "I'm 4 months pregnant." Though taken aback, I congratulated them with a strange smile, seeing my son and his new fiancée. Despite the joy of expecting a grandchild, I had doubts about their ability to raise a child properly. After some time, I visited them at their home. What I found was pure chaos. The house looked like it had been burglarized, with empty meal containers and noodle cups scattered all over. "What on earth is this mess?" I exclaimed. "Julia, are you eating properly? It's not just your body now. You're carrying a child." I had brought some fresh vegetables and suggested, "Shall we cook together?" But my pregnant daughter-in-law made a face and retorted, "Ah, cooking is such a hassle." As I began to explain the importance of proper nutrition, Noah sharply interrupted, "An annoying mother-in-law who nags all the time won't be appreciated. Stop picking on my wife." Despite my good intentions, Julia dismissed the vegetables, handing them back to me. "I don't need this," she said coldly. "Please stop making unnecessary comments. You're seriously annoying." Faced with their harsh criticism, I had no choice but to leave quietly, my heart heavy with concern. Eventually, Julia gave birth, and they brought the baby to meet me. As I looked at my newborn grandchild, wrapped in a soft blanket, my expression softened. "How adorable. It's a boy. What's his name?" "His name is Ethan," Noah replied before quickly changing the subject. "Mom, do you have something to give us?" Quote, Yes. Of course," I said, handing over an envelope. Julia snatched it quickly and eagerly opened it. "There's $1,300 in here," she exclaimed with a broad grin. Noah smiled and said, "Awesome. Maybe I'll treat myself to something nice." I tried to persuade them to use the money for the baby, but it was clear they weren't listening. Instead, Noah turned to me and said, "Mom, we're thinking of moving into your vacant house. Our current place is getting cramped, especially with Ethan now." I had recently moved from the house I shared with my late husband to a smaller apartment, and I hadn't yet decided whether to sell or rent the house. Raising children requires space and resources, so letting them live there seemed reasonable. I nodded in agreement. "I understand. You don't have to pay rent. Just take care of the place." Noah thanked me quickly, Thanks, Mom. We'll move in next month. But Julia added, please don't come to our house unannounced. We need our privacy. I was taken aback but replied softly, I understand. From then on, I could only visit when there was something urgent to discuss. Occasionally, I would contact them to share food or ask about Ethan. During those visits, they reluctantly allowed me to meet him, but it was clear they preferred to keep their distance. Nonetheless, my grandson was growing well and had even started calling me Grandma. Just before Ethan turned 4, I contacted them as usual, offering to bring him a snack. However, this time I received a message from Noah saying, Julia doesn't want to see you anymore. We've changed the locks so you can't come in. Surprised and hurt by this sudden and one-sided decision, I tried to reason with myself. Perhaps I had unintentionally offended Julia. I decided to give them space for a while. But my visits gradually stopped. Occasionally, when I contacted Noah, his responses were brief and dismissive. Then one day, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end said, I'd like to request repayment of your son's debt. Shocked, I learned that Noah had listed me as a co-signer on a loan. Though I had helped him financially before, I never expected something like this. I immediately tried to contact Noah, but he didn't respond. Frustrated, I went to their house, but no one answered the door. After days of trying to reach them, I began to worry they had disappeared. I checked with Noah's workplace, but he had quit. The neighbors knew nothing either. A whole week passed since my first visit, and I decided to report them missing to the police. One day, after another failed attempt to contact them, I returned to their house. I repeatedly pressed the intercom button, but there was no answer. Just as I was about to leave, I heard a faint thud from inside. It was as if something had shifted. Desperate, I called out, Is anyone in there? Show yourself, please. There was no response, but the sound inside piqued my curiosity. That's when I noticed the garden-side casement window was slightly ajar. With trepidation, I entered the house, only to be met with a sight that made me scream in horror. My 5-year-old grandson Ethan was crouched on the floor, chained to a radiator. His frail body trembled. I rushed to his side. Are you okay, sweetheart? I exclaimed, my heart pounding. The room reeked of decay, and around him lay empty bread bags and scattered plastic bottles. His voice was barely audible as he whispered, Grandma, did you come to rescue me? Quote, I quickly fetched some water and tried to give it to him. Give it to my sister first, he cried. Your sister? Who's your sister? I asked, confused. At that moment, a weak cry echoed from the corner of the room. I turned to see a baby, no more than 3 months old, lying in a makeshift bed. My shock was so great that I dropped the cup. Desperate to help, I quickly unfastened Ethan's chain, scooped up the baby, and rushed both children to my car. I drove straight to the hospital, praying it wasn't too late. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that both children were suffering from severe malnutrition. Ethan had clearly been caring for his baby sister, Sophie, all by himself. When the doctor inquired about the circumstances, I could only shake my head. I hadn't been involved in Noah and Julia's lives for so long. I had no idea how things had gotten this bad. Ethan and Sophie were admitted to the hospital, and soon after, the police arrived. They questioned me about Noah and Julia's whereabouts, but I could offer little information. Ethan eventually explained that his parents had gone abroad, leaving him to care for Sophie. They told me to stay tethered to her so I wouldn't run away, he said, his voice trembling. Shocked and horrified by what my grandson had endured, I held him tightly, vowing to protect him and Sophie from further harm. When I returned to the house to collect their belongings, I found a travel brochure for an overseas cruise. As I flipped through it, A piece of paper fell out. It revealed that Noah and Julia had financed their trip by borrowing money, with me as the co-signer. They had abandoned their children to go on a lavish vacation, and the realization filled me with fury. 3 days later, I watched from the shadows as Noah and Julia returned home, pulling their large suitcases behind them. They were laughing and chatting about how much fun they had on the trip. "That was amazing," Julia exclaimed. "We should do it again soon." But when they turned the corner and saw their belongings stacked outside, they froze. "What the hell is going on here?" Noah muttered, shocked. I stepped out and confronted them. "Did you enjoy your trip?" Quote. Noah looked shocked and exclaimed, "What the hell is this? What's going on, Mom?" Quote. I couldn't hold back my anger. "Was your overseas trip worth it, Noah? Did you enjoy abandoning your children?" Quote. Both Noah and Julia recoiled in surprise but quickly tried to defend themselves. "Didn't we tell you not to come near our house?" Julia snapped. I sighed. If I hadn't been made a co-signer, I wouldn't have interfered, but when I saw that window open, I couldn't resist. "This house is in my name. After all, is there a problem?" Quote. Julia's face paled. "Wait, where are the kids? Let us see them," she exclaimed. "The children are in the hospital," I replied. "They were severely malnourished by the time I found them. They had run out of food and water." Noah and Julia stared at me in disbelief. "They're alive? So what's the big deal?" Noah said dismissively. "Now, what about the house?" Quote. "I've decided to sell it," I declared. "You two aren't fit to live here." Noah erupted in anger. "This is our home. You can't just throw us out." Quote. "I have no intention of letting anyone who abandoned their children live here." "Pack your things and leave," I said coldly. At that moment, the distant wail of a police siren drew closer. Julia's face drained of color. "Noah, what should we do? Are we going to get arrested?" Quote. Noah, his voice falsely cheerful, turned to me and pleaded, "Mom, please smooth things over for us. Convince the police we're innocent. We promised to do better." Resolute, I shook my head. "No. Today, I sever all family ties. What you've done to your children is unforgivable." Julia and Noah slumped in defeat as the police arrived and took them into custody. Later, they were found guilty of child neglect and abandonment. I took legal action and obtained full custody of Ethan and Sophie. They are my responsibility now, and though raising them presents challenges, it brings me great joy. Ethan helps with household chores, and Sophie has started to talk. Every day is busy, but my grandchildren give me the strength to keep going. Noah and Julia now live in a rundown apartment far away, unable to find steady employment due to the media coverage of their case. I have no sympathy for them. My focus is on giving Ethan and Sophie the love and care they deserve. Thanks to them, every day is fulfilling, and I will continue to cherish them for the rest of my life.